Greetings, Benjamin J. from BENZTRAINZ with another in the series. Well, what you're looking at, of course, is the Marx 6000 A and B unit. Now, the problem with it, of course, is the A unit has the power, the B unit is just a dummy, 4 trucks and an empty shell. And I got an email, probably 10 days ago, asking me, is there a way to add a motor to the 6000B, the dummy? And I said, nope, there's no easy way to do it that I know of. And I started thinking about it, and I thought to myself, let's see if we can put a motor in the 6000B dummy unit. So this is the 6000A with the motor in it. Let's put it aside just to give us something to look at. This is the new 6000B with a motor. So let me pull the camera off the tripod, take this around, and show you how well this works. So a 6000B with a motor in it. This is approximately a 10-minute job. And I'm going to show you how to do it in just a minute. But as you can see, that is running absolutely perfectly. And this was a dummy about an hour ago. It had 4 empty trucks and a tab and slot on each end. And it was designed to be pulled behind the A unit, of course. So I started thinking, what would be an easy way to put a motor in this Marx 6000B unit? And I'll show you what I came up with. So let me put the camera back on the tripod. I'm shooting this with my cell phone, so forgive the jitter and the shakes. So this is what I've done. Drilled a hole in the top of the B unit, as you can see. None of this has been finalized or trimmed or anything else. And I've just got a brass screw with a thumb nut. And unscrew this and watch what happens. You lift the body off and there is a Marx micro motor. And I've just epoxied with epoxy putty a nut on the end of this screw and another thumb nut to set the spacing, and then drilled a hole in the top of the B unit, and this replaces the rear truck. It's really, really simple. It works really, really well. Now, of course, it's just a matter of getting this finalized. But the thing is, it works, and it works absolutely perfectly. You couldn't ask for it to work better than this. So what I did was I took out the rear truck, and these are just held in with fold-down tabs, as you see. So pulled the rear truck completely out, and I just flared the steps out of the way for now. So I still have to dress down the studs for the wheel where the push rod was. This is a motor out of a 490. So got this centered and epoxied, drilled the hole. Now it's just a case of getting it back on again. It slides right down onto the top of that nut or that bolt, replaces the entire rear truck. Tighten this into position, and you have a powered 6000B. I don't have this tight enough. There we go. So as you see, it works absolutely perfectly. I don't know how much pulling power it has yet because I just got it built. But it basically gives you 2 engines for the price of 1. And it only took a minute to do this. So I had that old 490 motor and just epoxied that bolt directly to the top of it. Let me take this back off, give you a close-up of how this actually works. It's really simple to do this. It's straightforward. It only actually took a minute once I figured it out. It was figuring it out was the hard part, of course. So lift the body off, and that has replaced the entire rear truck on the B unit for the 6000. It isn't very pretty, but when it's inside the motor, who cares? The thing is, it works. It cost nothing to make this. This is made out of junk that I had in my parts box. When I get these motors, usually I don't buy these micro motors. I pass on any engine that has these simply because you can't do anything with them, except specialty things like this. But I had this in the box, and I probably bought it to get the body, the 400 or the 490 body, and started looking at it and thought, there's got to be a way to mount this in this B shell. So I started looking at it, and as you can see, this motor is not that much bigger than this front truck. So I drilled a hole, as you can see, in the body, and then epoxied, and I just used epoxy putty. This is what I use to fill the slots in the wind-up Commodore Vanderbilts when I convert them into standard Commodores before I repaint them. You can use this just like Bondo. Use it for filling cracks, holes, crevices. It's actually quite an excellent glue. Epoxy putty, it's really, really inexpensive, and it cures hard as a proverbial rock. You can grind it, sand it, drill it, tap it. Pretty solid stuff. So, using that as the starting point, I just drilled the hole in the body, as you can see. And now this drops directly onto, let me see if I can find it. Where is it? It's so hard to see that bolt. I don't know if I can do it with this camera in my hand. There we go. So it slides down directly onto that motor, and then just is held in place with a thumb screw. And I'll be cutting this all off, of course, to make it look nicer. And you have to have this tight. And this motor is small enough that it does not have to pivot. It actually goes around the curves without having to turn inside the shell. So let's take this around again. I got my power turned off, I think, and my wheels are off. All right, hold on. Power's coming on. All right, power is on. As you can see, this 6000B is just flying around this track. So all I have to do is add a headlight to it, and I have a second 6000 that cost me the cost of the body itself. I paid $20 for both of these. Now this is the standard A unit, and it uses pretty much the same principle, but this motor is so big that you see it has to swivel as it turns. This motor is small enough that it can go around the turns without swiveling at all. It just remains straight. And it's a really, really simple way to do this. It only takes a couple of minutes. Literally, it only takes a couple of minutes if you have the motor. And then once you do the modification, you just drill the hole, drop the motor into the body, and you have a powered 6000B that will run just as well as the 6000A with a lot less hassle. And remember, I've been working on the 6000A for the last couple of days, been adding weight to it. And so I got to know it, and I got to know it rather well. And in the process of getting to know it, I started to study this, and I was thinking to myself, you know, the only reason that motor has to pivot is because it's so big, so it has to physically pivot as it goes around a corner. This motor is so much smaller that you can leave it absolutely straight and it still manages the curves without having to pivot at all. And so you can tighten this thing down good and snug, and it runs absolutely beautifully. And as you can see, it's quiet, it's smooth. Once I chop that bolt off, it's going to look nice, and it costs you almost nothing. And if you have one of these micro motors, I don't know what Marx actually called these little motors. I just call them micro motors because they're much, much smaller. But in this case, it replaced that rear original truck almost perfectly, with no visible signs of modification other than this big bolt sticking out the top. Now, once I chop this off and put a nice finished nut on that, you would never know that this has been modified at all, other than the fact that it is the B unit. And so now I have to mount a tab and slot coupler on the back, because the coupler that was originally in it was mounted on the truck itself. So once I get that installed, I now have basically a switcher. It has a coupler in the front, it has a coupler in the back. Unfortunately, these micro motors always only run forward. But even so, it makes it a really interesting engine that costs you nothing to make this. I mean, this was made out of scrap. It was made out of junk, just stuff in the parts box. And when I started looking at it, I thought, you know, I bet if I can find a way to mount it, it doesn't even have to swivel. All it has to do is sit in there. And I was absolutely correct. And this works much better than I anticipated it working. It runs well, it looks nice, it's no longer a dummy, so you now have two powered 6,000 units. The A unit is going to be much more powerful because it has a full-size Marx motor in it. Single reduction, but has a full-size motor. This has the micro motor, but still, it should be able to pull 6-10 cars, something like that. And you add a traction tire, it can probably pull substantially more. But I just wanted to do a quick video on this. It's really, really simple. And it just came to me in a flash when I had this apart looking at it. Like I said, I spent a lot of time with this one apart. And so I really got to know it, how it was built, how it was designed, how it worked. And then looking at the dummy unit, I thought, you know, all I would have to do is find a way to mount a motor in that. It doesn't have to swivel. So at first I used double stick tape, and I just glued it in there for the very first test. And it worked. And then I realized all I would have to do is mount a bolt sticking out the top, just to make it simple and easy. And it also matches the original that way. And so, like I said, I had a brass bolt, a couple of brass thumb screws, and some epoxy putty. And it's really, really simple. It's really straightforward. No muss, no fuss. This works really, really well. The nice thing about it, of course, is just the fact that it works. It allows you to add a motor to a Marx 6000 dummy. And as far as I know, this is the only motorized 6000B that there is. I have never seen another one. So I'll probably be seeing some now, because this is a really, really simple way to do this. Once you get this spacing correct, and this spacing, or this thumb wheel or thumb nut, just happened to be exactly the right height once I had this epoxied in place. And so you just drop the body onto it, and you have an instant powered 6000B. Really, really simple to do this. Let me put this back together again. There we go. And you can see how simple that is. Put the front trucks on the rail, and then retighten the nut. And like I said, I'll be cutting this bolt off, and find a nice nut that would look good. And again, this motor does not have to swivel. It can stay absolutely straight. It is short enough that it can navigate these curves without physically having to swivel. So tighten this down. Hold on a second. Let me give this. There we go. Good and snug. Let's take it around one more time. So an absolutely simple and perfect way to mount a motor in the 6000B. And it looks nice. You would never know this was homemade. And like I said, once I get this chopped off and I find a nice finial to put on there, this is going to look like it came out of the factory. The nice thing about it, of course, is the fact that it didn't come out of the factory this way. This was a complete dummy engine. And it had absolutely no practical value at all. You could pull it behind the 6000A, but you couldn't do anything with it by itself. It was always just mute. It always just sat there. Not anymore. You now have a powered 6000B. And like I said, once I get the coupler put on the back of it, it's going to be interesting to run this to see just how much weight it can pull. But it has plenty of power. There's no doubt about that. It has plenty of power. So I'm sure this could pull any normal size consist without any trouble at all. It's just now a matter of testing. But I just want to do a quick video to show you how to do it. Really, really simple. The Marx micro motor, a bolt, a couple of nuts, and some epoxy putty. And of course the 6000B. And the 6000B actually looks better than the 6000A does, in my opinion. And as I said, it looks like it came out of the factory this way. This does not look like it was homemade. It doesn't look like a hack job or butcher job. This actually works, it fits, it runs really, really well. So I just wanted to do a quick video on how to convert a 6000B dummy into a powered Southern Pacific 6000 diesel engine. Remember, you saw it here first. So as always, if you have any questions, feel free to drop me an email. BENZTRAINZ@gmail.com. And as always, thank you for watching.